I feel like, Steph, that, Pete is suggesting that this carnage is going to continue in the high growth, high valuation names. It's not going to hit the mega caps. And then you can extrapolate that it's not going to hit the overall market all that hard, because as long as the biggest stocks hold up relative to what the others are doing in their own pullbacks, then you don't have a huge market event as a result.
Well, as you know, I'm underweight tech, I'm underweight comm services and software. I am overweight in semis, and my most recent purchase of all the FANGs is Facebook on that drop that Pete was just talking about. But I think what you have to look at, you have to step back and you have to look at the macro. That's what I do in terms of my sector allocations and kind of big picture thinking. And I look at economic growth, I look at inflation, I look at Fed policy as well as interest rates and where I think they're all going. And I thought yesterday was very interesting that Biden, Powell, and Yellen all talked about curbing inflation. I mean, I have been saying this all year, that inflation is not transitory. Not all of it anyway, right? I don't think it's runaway, but it's elevated. That's the bad news. The good news is that economic growth is also elevated and above trend. And so if you add all of this up, you have a Fed that can taper more. You have a Fed that could probably raise rates sooner. And if they raise rates sooner, what does that do to the high multiple stocks, the high growth stocks, and even the FANG stocks? It's going to be more of a value market versus a growth market. And you can pick and choose whatever you want. As I said, I mentioned that I bought Facebook because it fell 18%. It's trading at 20 times. But Microsoft is trading at 37 times. Its valuation is the highest in 20 years. Amazon also is really expensive. So I think you really want to be careful in terms of tech because it's over-owned, and a lot of these valuations are hard to support. As I said, semiconductors, I think, are more reasonable. I think enterprise IT spending stocks are good, like IBM and HPE and Cisco. I like cybersecurity. So I think you can find ways and places in tech to pick, and that's what I'm doing.
Let's attack what you just said from a couple different ways, because Morgan Stanley's Katie Huberty is out with a note today suggesting that big tech is still underowned. As you suggest, it's overowned. She says it's not, that Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon's active portfolio weights are 1 to 2 points below their S&P 500 weighting, indicating shares are still underowned. So, I don't know what you do with that, but that seems to be a pretty interesting piece of research, not to mention the fact that it's almost like you can't even discuss Apple and Microsoft and some of these big FANG names in the same way that you talk about other tech stocks, because, yes, their valuations from a historical standpoint may be higher or the highest that they've ever been. They're still deemed by some to be cheap, if not value stocks, and at the same time, defensive. And that's why money's going to continue to go there.
Well, and you have to say free cash flow, because that's the other positive as well. Microsoft is 6.4% of the S&P 500. Okay, that's a big, big weighting. So I don't own any of it, right? Apple is a 6% weighting in the S&P 500. I'm at 5%. So I still own a lot of Apple. But I'm not going to be overweight. I just don't think that's a prudent thing to do as a portfolio manager, and being a diversified portfolio manager. I don't want to become the FANG portfolio. That's just not my style. So, yes, I agree that maybe they're underowned relative to their weightings, but they're still owned a lot, right? And I think that they're pretty discovered. So I just take issue with the fact that you want to be overweight all of these FANGs, and I think you're just more vulnerable in a portfolio if you do. So, you can pick your spots, Scott. I'm picking my spots in Facebook, right? And I own market weight in Alphabet. So those are the two that I'm talking about. But these others are harder to be overweight.